The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien.
When Bilbo opened his eyes, he wondered if he really had, for it was as dark as with his eyes shut. No one was anywhere near. He could hear nothing, see nothing, and he could feel nothing except the stone floor. Very slowly he got up and groped on all fours till he touched the wall of the tunnel. His head was swimming, and he was far from certain even of the direction he had been going when he had fallen. He guessed as well as he could and crawled along for a good way. Suddenly, his hands met what felt like a tiny ring of cold metal lying on the floor of the tunnel. It was a turning point in his life, but he did not know it. He put the ring in his pocket almost without thinking. He went only a little further, then sat down on the cold floor. He could not think what to do, nor could he think what had happened, or what had been left behind, or even why his head was so sore. But after a while, he drew out his little elvish sword, and somehow it comforted him.
Go back. No good at all. Go sideways. Impossible. Go forward. The only thing to do. On we go.
So he got up and trotted along with his sword held in front of him and one hand feeling the wall. On and on he went, down and down. Suddenly, he trotted without warning into icy cold water. That pulled him up sharp. He stopped and listened hard, and he could hear drops, drip, drip, dripping from an unseen roof into the water below. But there was no sound of water flowing.
So it must be a pool or a lake.
Deep down here by the dark water lived old Gollum, a small, slimy creature. He was dark as darkness, except for two big, round, pale eyes on his thin face. He lived on a slimy island of rock in the middle of the lake. Bilbo could not see him, but Gollum was watching him now from the distance, with his pale eyes like telescopes. Gollum got onto his little boat and shot off from the island. He paddled it with his large dangling feet over the side, but never a ripple did he make. Bilbo was sitting on the water's brink at the end of his way in wits, when up paddled Gollum, his eyes glowing softly in the dark. Bilbo jumped nearly out of his skin. He thrust the sword in front of him.
Flash us and splash us, my precious. I guess it's a choice feast. At least a tasty morsel it'd make us. Gollum.
Who are you?
What is she, my precious?
I'm Mr. Bilbo Baggins. I've lost the dwarves and the wizard, and I don't know where I am.
What's he got in his handsies?
A sword, a blade made by the elves in the Goblin Wars.
Perhaps she sits here and chats with it a bitsy, my precious. It likes riddles, perhaps it does. Does it?
Gollum was anxious to appear friendly until he found out more about the sword and the Hobbit, whether he was quite alone, and whether he was good to eat.
Very well,
Said Bilbo, who was anxious to agree until he found out more about the creature, whether he was quite alone, and whether he was fierce or hungry.
You ask first.
So Gollum hissed.
What his roots, as nobody sees, is taller than the trees. Up and up it goes, and yet never grows.
Easy. Mountain, I suppose.
Does it get easy? It must have a competition with us, my precious. If Precious asks and it doesn't answer, we eat it, my precious. If it asks us and we doesn't answer, then we does what it wants, eh? We shows it the way out, yes?
All right.
Said Bilbo, not daring to disagree, and nearly bursting his brain to think of riddles that could save him from being eaten. All he could think of was an old one.
30 white horses on a red hill. First they champ, then they stamp, then they stand still.
Cheese, cheese, but we only has 6, my precious.
Then Gollum asked the second.
Voiceless it cries, wingless flutters, toothless bites, mouthless mothers.
Half a moment.
cried Bilbo, who was still thinking uncomfortably about being eaten. Fortunately, he had once heard something like this before, and getting his wits back, he thought of the answer.
Wind of course.
Bilbo was so pleased that he made up one on the spot.
An eye in a blue face saw an eye in a green face. That eye is like to this eye, said the first eye, but in low place, not in high place.
Gollum had been underground a long, long time, and was forgetting this sort of thing, but as Bilbo was beginning to hope that the wretch would not be able to answer, Gollum brought up memories of ages and ages ago.
Sun on the daisies, it means. It does.
These above-ground sort of riddles were tiring for Gollum, and they made him hungry too. So this time, he tried something a bit more difficult and unpleasant.
It cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelled. It lies behind stars and under hills, and empty holes it fills. It comes first and follows after, ends life, kills laughter.
But Bilbo had heard that sort of thing before, and the answer was all around anyway.
Dork.
Bilbo was still trying to think of a really hard one. To gain time, he asked one he thought would be easy.
A box without hinges, key or lid, a golden treasure inside its head.
But Gollum hissed and spluttered and did not answer.
Well, what is it?
Give us a chance. Let it give us a chance, my precious. Eggsy it is.
Now Gollum thought it was time to ask something hard and horrible.
This thing all things devours. Birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grind hard stones to metal. Slays kings, ruins town, and beats high mountain down.
Bilbo sat in the dark, thinking of all the giants and ogres he had ever heard of, but not one of them had done all these things. He had a feeling that the answer was quite different and that he ought to know, but he could not think of it. He began to get frightened, and this was bad for thinking. Gollum began to get out of his boat. He flapped into the water and paddled to the bank. Bilbo could see the eyes coming towards him. His tongue seemed to stick in his mouth. He wanted to shout. Give me more time, give me time. But all that came out was,
Time!
Bilbo was saved by pure luck, for time was the answer. Gollum was getting angry, and also tired of the game. It had made him very hungry indeed. He sat down in the dark by Bilbo.
It's got to ask us a question, my precious. Yes, yes, yes. Just one more question to guess. Yes, yes.
But Bilbo simply could not think of any question with that nasty, wet, cold thing sitting next to him, pawing and poking him. He scratched himself, he pinched himself. Still, he could think of nothing.
Ask us, ask us.
Bilbo pinched himself and slapped himself and even felt in his pocket. There, he found the ring he picked up in the passage and forgotten.
What have I got in my pocket?
Not fair. It isn't fair, my precious. Is it? To ask us what it's got in its nasty little pocketses.
Bilbo had been talking to himself, but Gollum had thought it was a riddle. Having nothing better to ask, Bilbo stuck to his question.
What have I got in my pocket?
You must give us 3 guesses, my precious. 3 guesses.
Very well, guess away.
Pansies.
Wrong, guess again.
Gollum thought of all the things he kept in his own pockets. Fish bones, goblin's teeth, wet shells, a bit of bat wing, a sharpening stone to sharpen his fangs on. He tried to think of what other people kept in their pockets. hissed and spluttered and rocked backwards and forwards, slapping his feet on the floor, wriggling and squirming, but he dared not waste his last guess.
Time's up.
String or nothing.
Both wrong.
Bilbo jumped at once to his feet and held out his sword.
And now you must show the way out.
Cut. Let's give him a quick round.